Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us. I know it's lunch hour, so the folks who are here, we appreciate that quite a bit. Thanks for being here. Our Brand Response Council is bringing you today's session. So Chris Foster, Modern Postcard, is the chair of our Brand Response Council. He's also the host of our Take 20 webinar series, which runs every other Wednesday, not this week, though, every other Wednesday at 2 o'clock Eastern, 11 o'clock Pacific. It's become very popular over the year and a half we've run it now. And Chris is a great moderator, so we're happy to have him here today with a tremendous group of fellow members of the Brand Response Council. We're only here today because of the power of our members, 140 member companies, our 40 sponsors here at the show, and of course all of our attendees. One of our key sponsors, Paymerang, is the educational session sponsor, and they've got a quick word for us.
People ask me frequently, what is Paymerang and why do you use it? I tell them that Paymerang is a great way to pay your vendors, and you also get money back. And usually they're like, that's too good to be true. You've got to be kidding me. And you don't have to do all the upfront legwork. So I talk to them about it and I tell them how it works. You sign up with them, they do all the research on your vendors. You send them your vendor list, they do the research, they give you an average of what potentially your rebates may be based on that information. Then with that information, you go through it. And after you've implemented, you can see it takes away so much time from your accounts payable team. You see that you no longer have to do massive bank reconciliations. You see the amount of time that it saves your team. I don't know why anybody wouldn't use Paymerang. So when I'm talking to other CFOs or I'm talking to other controllers, I tell them why I use Paymerang and I explain the process of using it. And then most of the people want to find out about it.
So thank you again, Paymerang, for your support. And thank you to our fine crew here. And Chris will introduce the rest of the squad. So take it away.
All right. Matt goes on. Fantastic. Well, thanks, everybody, for coming, especially during the lunch hour. Okay, I'll speak more softly because we're getting the feedback. So this is about reducing frictions and solving problems. So I'm just going to do a preamble and then introduce these fine folks. So during the pandemic years, some market spaces thrived while others shriveled. There were new opportunities for e-commerce brands while travel and restaurant sectors kind of contracted a bit. Every part of the brand and response ecosystem shifted during this economic earthquake. And out of all the aftershocks and the settling in, there's been an emergence, a way to rethink how we bake change into our organizations. And I all think we learned two valuable lessons. One, uncertainty persists despite our best efforts. And two, the organizations that plan for change and reduce their own internal frictions and customer-facing frictions are the ones that are thriving. So a big part of 2022 isn't just about adding fuel, all the sales and marketing to grow. It's also about reducing frictions, those large and small forces that kind of slow momentum and growth, figuring out that in your organization and also in your industry. So this topic was inspired by a book called The Human Element by Lauren Nordgren and David Schoenthal. Got to give them the props. So we've got some performance marketing experts and really excited about talking about how these frictions are reduced. I'll give you a little example of to express this idea. So there's a Chicago furniture store. They did custom-made furniture, awesome stuff, but they couldn't sell. All the customers would come into the store. They loved these products. They loved the combination. They loved the customization, but they weren't closing deals. And they were trying to figure out, why is this? And then one of the customers said, well, I'd love to buy it, but what am I going to do with my own sofa? I don't know how to get rid of it. Do I put it in the dumpster? Do I get somebody to take it out? Where is it? So I can't buy this because I still have this other one. And the store was like, we'll remove your furniture for free if you customize one with us. And sales went through the roof because all they did was remove the friction that wasn't even on their own. It was on the customer side. So there are all these things that impact your ability to grow your business that you might not even be aware of. So discussing frictions from talent to measurement to privacy and some new trends. We've got some examples and case studies. And I'm really excited to and I'm privileged really to welcome the masters of our crafts. We got Sean Robertson from NBCUniversal. We've got Shane Allor from Kount, and we got Doug Bognar from Apex Media. So thanks, guys, for joining us. And Sean, I'm going to start with you. What industry-wide frictions, which kind of have been unseen, were revealed during the pandemic? What did you see?
That's a great question, a great way to start out. I would say the first one that we realized was that we were not prepared, and I say we as an industry, for how we work, right, and where we work. As it is now, the room upstairs that I'm staying in is as much my office as the home office I'm in, or 30 Rock, where I work for NBCUniversal. And we'd had hints of this, right, at my previous company where I worked with my friends at Dish, with Hurricane Sandy.
Okay.
Right, we weren't agile, right? We'd had some hot spots, but we did not have a network and a workflow that allowed the work to follow the sun or to follow the opportunity when we were displaced from the office with the storm. So we had to adjust quickly. I think NBC's done a fine job. We now have Wednesday office hours, but what it's created is a dialogue and a community of communication that we didn't have established before. So Wednesday office hours, the entire company, all 1,600 of our ad sales executives and professionals get to hear from our leadership about the areas of focus and opportunity. So we've looked at this challenge and we've really pivoted to say, how do we communicate better? How do we remove friction from how we work, from pitch to pay? And making sure that that's as smooth and easy for our customers and partners as possible. So I think that's one of the things that, as an industry, we've identified there's way too much paper, there's way too much of a tether to the desk, and the concept that I had to be in front of you in an office space, as opposed to collaborating and meeting our customers where they are, meeting our collaborators and our employees where they are.
That's awesome. I love the idea of frictions within communication, especially for a large organization like that. So, Doug, I'll ask you. Sean was talking about preparation for change or reacting to change. A lot of brands reacted to change instead of preparing for it. How did you guys handle that at Apex?
Yeah, so it was a struggle, clearly, and for the reasons that Sean mentioned as well. What are you prepared for when this unprecedented event, well, not unprecedented, I guess if you were around in 1908, you knew exactly what to do. I feel like there is a greater intimacy between our company and our clients now because we've really, really had to partner with them. And not only that, but little things like the development of video calls, Zoom, and I'm a Teams guy. So I see people's house. I see the bedroom that they're operating in or the dining room or whatever. I hear their dogs. I feel like we have made a closer connection than we had prior to me going to see them 3 times a year in Atlanta or wherever the case may be in their office when everybody's dressed up and you're not, I don't want to say real, but now you're seeing a more fully formed relationship with our partners. Supply chain. Huge issue. To get more direct with your question, I didn't realize how short our supply chain was. Interesting. When I see various live shopping networks selling toilet paper on air, because it's such an incredibly difficult commodity to find, I think it made the wheels spin for a lot of people on how do we repatriate our manufacturing? How do we get closer with our customer? We need to shorten those links.
And what's interesting about that is you talk about the intimacy with clients and learning how to work with clients, not just as a client, but also as a person, right? And I think that's exactly right. That's a really interesting change. And I also think, too, when you start preparing, right, every time you prepare for these frictions or these changes, there's some kind of risk that's involved, kind of unknowns. And you have to rethink about risk. I think, Shane, you're in the midst of all of that. What did you see the big change when you talk about risk mitigation with your clients?
Yeah, I think the big thing was the evolution of the customer and what they wanted and needed. Perfect small example is the increase in buy online, pick up in store. Like for us in the risk side of things, that created a whole new monster. Yeah. Versus what traditionally what we face, which is put your credit card on the checkout page, and we kind of knew the formula. Who was the bad guy? Who was the good guy? But now all these different factors of what the customer wants created this whole new mousetrap that we had to figure out, and not really leaning in more so to the risk side of things, but also now like what are my good customers? What do they look like? What are the digital attributes that I now know to decrease friction from there? And that's what our goal is now, is customer acquisition.
That's interesting. Mm-hmm. And I think that the buy online, pick up in store, I mean, everyone talks about BOPUS now, but I said 5 years ago, BOPAs, no one would know what you were talking about. And some businesses change. So one of the examples that we like to use, the Habit Burger, they're a franchise business. And during COVID, of course, they couldn't have restaurants, people sitting in their restaurants, right? So they had to develop an app, and their team was like, we've never developed an app before. Why would we develop an app for curbside pickup? It wasn't even necessary. But they had to do that and adjust. And I think, Sean, you had mentioned before in our conversation previously about Uber, putting that model in even before the need.
Yeah, and I think it's a learning lesson for all of us, right? We look to pivot, and there's rewards in pivoting quickly. But how do you sit where you are today in a successful business model using Uber? They are in the business of moving people. And even before COVID, they had started to develop this Uber Eats model. And a lot of naysayers in the industry, a lot of investors asked, why do you need to develop this mechanism to deliver food? Your core model is moving people. And with COVID, obviously, people weren't moving quite as much. So they had already built the process and the relationships and built the infrastructure needed to pivot quickly. And you saw the stock price as a result. So I think it's a learning lesson for us at NBC, right? We are in the content creation business. Clearly, we're competing with some of our partners by launching a platform like Peacock, which is direct to consumer. We have to diversify to meet the consumers where and how they want to consume content. And on the sales side, the B2B side, right, we have to make sure that for linear, digital, syndication, out of home, we're making that sales process collapsed and easier to execute against as well. So from where we sit today is not the challenges that we have today, but doing these brainstorming exercises, and we tend to do them a lot, right? That's the nature of the Take 20 that you launched quite a few years ago, is let's think about the unimaginable. Let's think about what could happen and what we should be doing because it's right, because it's going to prepare us for future challenges. And I think that's an exercise that all businesses should be and possibly are doing today.
No, I agree with you. And one of the challenges that we're all facing is Generation Z coming up. It's both a challenge and an opportunity. I'm sure everybody knows they're going to be the largest consumer group by 2025 or 2026. That's like 3 weeks away. And they have a whole host of expectations that they're coming to the table with. And Doug, you had talked about that, where there's more than just the purchase that they're looking for.
Yeah, and I wanted to pick up something that Sean was saying. So at the beginning of COVID, everybody was flying by the seat of their pants, right? I mean, every local Habit Burger was trying to figure it out. And I think the customer gave them a lot of leeway in that respect. Now, not so much. You have to be able to execute on your game right there. And to your point, there are higher expectations on multiple levels here. It's not only on the product side and the convenience side, and you're going to deliver this in 2 days and it's going to be free. It's, where are you aligned on the environment? Hey, Mr. Company, what do you think about climate change? Social issues that align with the customer are really important. And customers are choosing to do business with those that think and feel the same way that they do.
Yeah, they did a study with Generation Z, I think it's Pew Research, where 65% of Generation Zs will purchase from a brand that align with their social stance, and they will also leave a brand if it doesn't align with their social stance. So a whole new host of frictions are created, not just with the experience to make it fluid, but a friction of ethics and a friction of social values. That's very hard for CEOs and board members to figure out, but it's still doable. Actually, Sean's an example of this. I want to give you this, tell them the story of your sneakers. He's looking great, by the way, and everything he's wearing is direct to consumer.
The full outfit is direct to consumer. I did not leave my home to acquire any of this.
Commitment,
right?
there it is.
Commitment to the funnel. But it's actually not these sneakers, although I think they fall in a similar vein.
Sure.
When we were talking, I just purchased a pair of sneakers similar to these called Nothing New. It's a direct-to-consumer brand. And I have no interest in the company other than I came across it, and they are 100% made from recycled material. And just based off of that, I said, wow, these are recycled shoes, and the box is recycled cardboard. And the whole concept is, listen, direct-to-consumer is so easy to purchase and throw out, right? Single use, that's become the motto of what we do. But with these shoes, I invested in them because of that messaging, and that's how they reached me. And since then, Instagram and its smart algorithm has been targeting me with more and more eco-responsible products. So I've fallen into that vein. But I also, I think they're, like you said, as consumers, we're looking at brands like, what else do you offer beyond just the product or service that I'm purchasing for you? How is your impact on the rest of the ecosystem community? And since we spoke, I think we're seeing brands respond to the war that's going on in Ukraine, and they did it almost immediately, right? So brands are realizing, beyond this product or service, I need to have a stance and a message about what's happening elsewhere in the world.
Absolutely. I think that the consumers are realizing that the brands that don't show their awareness of global events are brands that are really out of touch.
Yep.
Right? And that brands start becoming, because of what I think is happening, especially with the younger generation, is they're not just looking to buy, they're looking for a relationship. Right? It's a really interesting thing. Mm-hmm. So if you create a relationship with that brand, just like with people, you got to figure out if they're going to stay true and loyal and expect you to do what you hope they're going to do. And you can also be disappointed in that relationship too. And then you look to other relationships to fill that. And a lot of it then comes down to choice. So Shane, how does this change in terms of the new choice model with the businesses that you see versus what was in the status quo before?
Yeah, I think the perfect example, or a small one again, is Uber Eats. So, I mean, I'll use a personal example. Like, I enjoy a good steak, but I don't like dressing up and going to a fancy steakhouse. Now I can order it in my sweatpants and stay at home? Oh my gosh, like that's incredible. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then as well, kind of jumping back to Sean's point around more so the customer acquisition side of things. Like they've been able to identify Sean as a good customer, and now they know that they've retained him, utilizing the good story. But now I can upsell him a lot easier than going out and finding 100 brand new ones. Right. So it's truly powerful, and that's really changed the ecosystem. Kind of the unknowns of COVID, but the knowns now are, hey, people really care about brands and not just about product, and that relationship of long-term. It's truly valuable.
And I think what's going to change, too, is the complexion of what an audience looks like, right? In the past, your audience could have been a demographic profile, which might have worked, and worked pretty well, but that's not going to work anymore.
No. And I often engage my customers, agencies, and clients, and beyond just the age, gender, all right, who are you trying to reach? Who is your customer? What do they look like? And take me on that customer journey. Because especially in D2C, and I think we abjugate this space in the marketplace a lot. We were the originators of having data about the end consumer, right, and actionable information that you can impact a media schedule in week, right? That goes back, I've been in this for over 2 decades now. And as a sales planner, as a young salesperson, I would have my customers calling me saying, this is working, that's not, cancel this, move money here, right? The rest of the industry has caught up with digital, with data-driven linear, those aspects of the business. So now that you have that and it's actionable, let's share, because I have data as well. How do we commingle that? How do we make sure that I'm using my information that I have within my walls at NBC and what you have in your customer stack and your data stack to make sure that I'm using my vehicle to deliver your message to the right audience at the right time?
Yet actually that's removing the frictions that were there before, right? Because people would put up the silos around the data. And sure, you've got to do it for privacy compliance, and you have to make sure that you're all on the up and up. But by having those walls and barriers, even between departments and or between vendor and agency and media business, that's a friction that blocks you from actually serving the customers and the brands.
Right.
That is self-created, right? No one else created those frictions except for you, right?
And it's got to be done at speed.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
The good information that's valuable today will not be valuable next week.
Right.
Or 2 weeks from now.
So, Doug, you had mentioned that before, and I'd like to touch base on the speed at which you recover and understand this, plus some of the expectations, where what are these, it's almost like you have these stars, right? And you're trying to draw a constellation between the stars. What do you see about these expectations for clients in the next 3 to 5 years?
Well, going back to a little bit of this, and even Sean's shoes, it's consumers are endorsing companies now. Yep. That's, they are choosing to do business with that. So companies are, listen, there's a bunch of smart people at these companies, And they're understanding that. They're understanding also there's a premium margin to be made on customized shoes. And that used to be, we were talking about this before the panel, it used to be $50. Now it's $10 or $15. And it makes it much more palatable. And a customer who's willing to be that committed to a brand, to pay a premium for a product, is your most valuable customer, right? So to Sean's point, you are collecting all of that data, and it's, again, not just age and zip code, and it's all of those characteristics that form them as a person, and you're marketing to them in every way that you possibly can, of course.
And it's funny, too, because even though we're collecting all that data, we're now bumping up against different privacy laws, right? I mean, with not just GDPR, but CCPA. So, Shane, I'm sure you're seeing that conflict between trying to gather as much data to get the customized profile versus the privacy.
Yeah, meeting the risk meets reward sort of a thing. But yeah, too, I mean, you want to be able to use that data, but you need to know how to use it. Mm-hmm. That's always the key thing for us too. Is we use it for risk mitigation, but gosh, let's repurpose it and understand what a customer looks like, because all those key data points are in there, and then you can repackage it up and sort of you can kind of thwart those privacy policies as well, too.
And it's kind of like working within, right? How can you connect, right? Because everyone can connect a Facebook to an email to a variety of other pieces of data, some that you choose and some that you don't choose. And what I'm looking for is, how are brands going to not only take advantage of it, but take advantage of it in a responsible and ethical way, right? Asking the permission from the client to give them as much information. And also, the clients now are so skeptical, especially Generation Z, they know they're being marketed to, right? So I think one of the challenges and one of the frictions that have to be removed is, I'm not really marketing to you, I'm having a relationship with you, and to have those customers believe it.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And, that generation, by the way, just assumes that they are being tracked and followed and data collected at every turn. And I think they embrace it in a lot of ways because it brings more relevant products to them. All of the studies, we all know, say that people don't have an adverse reaction to advertising or marketing tactics if they're relevant, if they make sense to them.
Right.
If it's something I need or want, I'm happy to know about it. So, and that generation in particular, really hard to sell, but at the same time, you can create a partnership with them.
Correct.
And I would say once you have them, you got them, right? Like that's huge.
I think that's true as well.
Mm-hmm. It's
huge. That sort of endorsement thing, in the partnership. We're developing a long-term relationship here as a consumer and a provider of a product, good, or service. So. But it's a tightrope to walk for a marketer, big time.
I got a side hustle teaching a brand strategy class, and I have all my students do what's called a tour of brands. And so I say, pick a brand, not that you like, pick a brand that you love, but most importantly, pick a brand that is part of your life and expresses yourself. And I've taught now for 10 years, 20 plus students, hundreds of students. Every single person, I guarantee you, even in this room and in this conference, everyone's got what I would call a love mark, at least one. They have a love mark. It's a brand that symbolizes their point of view. They can buy other brands like that in the industry, but there's one that they love, and it's part of their self-expression. I think that's going to be an important factor for this next generation. They're going to look for these brands that they love, and to Shane's point, they'll stay loyal to that brand if the brand stays who they want them to be and who they think they are.
The brand has to follow its true north, but they also have to be willing to adapt and listen to the audience, right?
Right.
One of my brands, you're talking about that brand mark. I have a Harley Davidson, right? Less than 4% of Americans own motorcycles.
Right.
That brand is going through a really tough time. They've stayed true to who they are, but their core audience is getting older by 6 months every year.
Right.
They're aging themselves out. So they're trying to re-identify themselves, but the struggle is, how do I stay Harley and true to what the brand message has been for the last 80 years? And how do I stay relevant to a Gen Y that is adverse to loud bikes, pollution, and all of these other variables. And part of that's been the electric bike, but they faltered in how they launched that too, right?
Right.
And they really didn't tap into marketing partners. They really didn't tap into an agency or to consumer, the voice of the consumer ahead of time. They're doing that now.
Right, and I would see that for Harley, that's a challenge because a hallmark of that brand is right? It's the noise.
They tried to patent the sound.
Right.
Yeah.
And so how do you create an electric Harley and still have the older Harley, the core Harley audience not be turned off, right? The one thing I also, as a side note, that I love about the Harley Davidson logo is I ask all my students, I say, what's that Harley Davidson? What is it really? It's a badge.
It's a badge.
It's a badge, right? It's who I am. And a lot of these best brands understand that. They understand that my audience will follow me because I'm true to them.
Right.
So one question, I'd like to shift gears a little bit because we're talking about Generation Z as a consumer. But what about Generation Z as an employee? What about hiring? So Shane, as you're building Kount and you're hiring Gen Y, how's that going?
Yeah, I mean, there's all it's all new now, and it's the new norm, is what I like to say it, because I historically was used to working Monday through Friday in the office. Now, during the pandemic, I got a taste of working from home, and I actually really enjoy it. And it's so relatable to a consumer too, and kind of back to Sean's point, where Harley Davidson, one, has to evolve maybe the product, but also how they interact with the customer. So let's funnel dollars into the website. How do we acquire customers on that side of things instead of the traditional, where their consumer was mostly going in store and looking at different bikes. Now, gosh, how do they see them online? How do they do research? How do we get them to acquire different products from us now and doing it in a different way? Kind of on a sidetrack, but
because I think this whole generation has different expectations, both as consumers and as workers. And Doug, you had talked before in a previous Take 20 about the after effects of the Great Resignation, right? And how this is affecting the entire industry.
Oh, yeah, it's massive, right? I mean, people are deciding, I hate my job. I'm not going to drive 45 minutes into work or take a train an hour. I can do it from my bedroom. We've proven that over the last 2 years. So if you're going to mandate that I come in, I'm just going to go get another job.
Right.
And I'm going to get a job that supports my lifestyle and what I believe in, as opposed to a job so that I have health care and I can send my kids to the private school or whatever the case may be. You know, company after company, from Salesforce, REI built a huge new beautiful campus in Seattle, I think. It was in Seattle. And I think opened it like the week before COVID hit. Well, they've sold that because they understood that it was a benefit to their employees and a benefit beyond that. I mean, they want to endorse people being outside and being in an environment that builds them as a person while still getting the work done. And they were able to do that.
Right.
So they took a bunch of cars off the road that were traveling to their office every day. They're helping the environment. It is just, I mean, it's a complete win for them.
It is, and what I love about that story is what we just talked about with Love Marks. To me, REI is one of the most perfect brands that exists. They have a co-op model, right? So it's the business and the customer, but it's not a business and customer, it's a community, right? Every decision they make aligns with the concept of get more people outdoors and protect the environment. So even by removing that campus, it's in alignment with their values.
That's exactly
right. Because it's a lower carbon footprint.
Yep.
And I think what's, one of the things that you talked about with, the friction of an organization is this is another new friction. How do I reduce the friction to hire great talent?
Well, I think you have to make your job, your company, a destination that folks want to go to. But I think you do that with the office too, right? If I were REI, I would have reduced the scale of the actual building. But why not have hiking trails at the location, right? If you want to be authentic with the brand. One of the brands that did, and it's not new, Burton, right? If you are familiar with the company, snowboarding, surfing, they encourage their employees. If it's a great day for snow, grab a board, go test it out, tell us what you think, right? That's their collaboration. They get their employees out to test the product, live, breathe, taste the brand. You go to Nike's offices in Midtown, a huge part of their footprint is a giant basketball court. They want you to grab some sneakers, go test it out. Tell us what's good about the product. Tell us what's wrong with the product. That's what I think brands need to do, right? Like a brand like ours, where we have studio space on location, where you can taste, touch, feel the brand. How authentic is it delivering? And we want to hear that feedback from the employees. That's what you want to engage them with, right? What do our meeting spaces look like? The whole idea of bringing my whole self to office, I couldn't see myself bringing my dog to work. But for a lot of employees, that's their closest family member, right? If you're young, single, that's my family. I want to bring my dog, him or her, with me. How do you engage that? How do you make that community feel where the productivity is going up? But I want to go to work, maybe not 5 days a week, but the 2 or 3 days that I need to go there, I'm getting something else that I can't get at home. And I think that's how we solve for it.
I think that's really interesting. That's a really great insight, because people used to say, well, there's work at home and Starbucks, but work can actually be a destination that's fulfilling just beyond the job itself.
Right.
That's excellent. I love that. Let's see.
I think just to follow up on what Sean was saying, there's a bounce back for sure on going to the office. The first 6 months or year of working from home, everybody said, I'm never going back to the office. I'm not gonna have a job that does that. And I hear more and more recently, I'm gonna go back to the office 2 days a week because I want to.
Mm-hmm. Right. FOMO.
Yeah.
I'm going back because there's stuff happening there that if I'm not a part of, and I think what you'll start to see is the folks that are on site, again, not overdoing it. I don't want to be in the chair, nor do I want anybody on my team in the chair just to be there. I remember being a sales assistant, a sales planner, and just sitting there on a Friday like, my boss hasn't left yet, I'm not leaving yet. Mm-hmm. Nothing to do, just sitting here, just waiting, just in case. Yeah. That's a waste of my time and the company's time. But for folks who are on site and do get those impromptu meetings, I've had more face time with my senior executives in the last 6 months than at any other point in my career, right? Yeah. The fact that Linda Yacarino's walking around, there are only 20 people on the floor, I get face time.
Right.
That's important.
We're all super efficient, or I should say most are super efficient working from home, but it's the effectiveness that is the variable that's a little harder to discern because of those reasons that you're talking about, Sean. I've worked from my home for 15 years, but I can tell you the 1 week, a quarter, or whatever that I spend in Scottsdale, man, do I get a lot done. And I don't get a lot done of like everyday tasks. I get people coming to me to say, hey, did you ever think about this? Or why do we do this way? Boom. I mean, a lot of innovation takes place there, whereas otherwise it's a quick Teams call, hey, ABC equals D. So I think the effectiveness of being in the office, and I'm not arguing for it if my boss is listening, but...
No, I like that distinction. And Shane, you were talking about being a younger worker and loving working from home. There's a gap that missed where you're not next to a mentor in the office. And what I found now as I start getting older is, how do I pay it forward as much as I can to as many people as I can, right? That's much harder to do in Zoom, right? Like you said, if you've got a Zoom call, there's an agenda, and we all know it's kind of awkward to yik-yak and talk through Zoom because it's not as clean, it's not as personable. So having those hallway conversations that are a couple minutes, how's family, how's this, I was thinking about this, did you read that? Oh yeah, and by the way, this idea, this is how it applies to us. This is how I was thinking about how it applies to us. It's this natural, organic discussion that happens. The effectiveness of that is huge, and that's actually where you remove some of the frictions of misunderstanding, because you can't communicate that in an email. You can't, texting doesn't work. It's the in-person that makes all the difference.
And it would have been a day to book a Zoom meeting, right? To probably uncover some of those things when you could have just walked down the hallway to a mentor that,
right.
One of those things too.
We tried to do some of the water cooler stuff at the beginning of COVID via Zoom or Teams, and it's so forced. It's just,
not organic, right?
That's right, and you cannot force feed that.
Right.
It's,
But I will say, one of the byproducts of COVID that we've had to incorporate that I think is a good takeaway, we've had to really examine how we onboard talent. Right. It used to be the old adage, okay, you're new. Hey, why don't you sit down and you shadow Doug. You guys have the same job. He's done it. He's been here a year. Doug's pretty good at his job. Shadow him. You can't do that as easily through Zoom, right? Shadowing all the meetings and getting that same touch point. So we really examine how we onboard people, how we couple them with mentors, both formally and informally, right? Creating those opportunities to connect, grab a coffee. I've done a Zoom meal. Don't do that. Don't advise that to anybody, sitting down and cutting your steak.
That's terrible.
So tell me about your day. Not as organic, right?
Yeah. Can't
But
pass the steak sauce. No.
how you actually organize somebody's day in those early weeks really makes an impact, right? First time ever that I was onboarded remotely, it's a challenge, right? And I kudos to you. I know people who have been remote for 10, 15 years and mastered it and been highly effective and efficient. It's a skill that the rest of us have had to develop. And as you're onboarding new talent, finding out from them, right? If you're a recent college graduate, the last 2 years of your university experience have been remote, right? You haven't met your teachers in person. You haven't met a lot of your classmates in person. And I need to learn from you. What are your expectations? What are the best practices? And start to incorporate some of that into what we're doing in our company.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of those youngsters coming in, I'm old enough to call them youngsters, right? They come in and they actually don't know, right? Because they've never been in a work environment before, right? So, my daughter's going to be heading into the workforce in about a year, and she's like, "Oh my gosh, I don't want to work from home. I go crazy if I work from home. I want to be with kids, people my own age. I want to be with workers my own age. I want to have that mentor and find that mentor and learn how to be a professional." And I think that's a really big upcoming friction that all organizations of any size are going to have to tackle. How do you onboard? How do we bring new talent in? Because there's no doubt that all of us in this room are getting older, and we owe it to our brands and businesses to bring in the next generation and the bench players, right? If a business is a tribe and your job is to feed and protect the tribe, how do you keep the tribe going with the next generation? It's a challenge we're all going to have to face.
And attracting the best and brightest talent possible, right? Because there's a lot of competition now. I work at one of the big three, a company that predates the first ever television broadcast, and we're competing with Amazon, Facebook, and Google for talent.
Right.
And that's a real thing. What are we offering that they're not, or where do we compete and exceed in the marketplace where they're underperforming? Those are real questions that we have to address.
Sure, and not only are you competing with those folks, but my hunch is, I might be wrong, there are 300 streaming services out there creating, managing, curating content.
Oh yeah.
That's a lot.
So I'm in the midst of onboarding right now. I hired someone a few weeks ago, and she was supposed to meet us here. But thanks to American Airlines, she won't be here till tomorrow night at 8 o'clock. So, but I have fretted over her onboarding process more than any other hire I've ever made, maybe back to the first person I ever hired.
Interesting.
Because it's all remote. I'm in Indiana, sorry. Headquarters is in Scottsdale. She lives in Las Vegas. Thankfully, she's a seasoned salesperson, but not in this industry. So there's I have to teach her the TV business or the media business, which I'm confident she can take, but it's just a whole different environment. I probably planned this out with, and it's all blown up in my face, but I probably planned this onboarding more closely than any other I've done.
So I've got a question for you, Doug. This is new and impromptu, so we'll figure it out. How were your preparations versus the reality?
I can't answer that question right now because they were supposed to start about 2 hours ago. So I had a lot of great plans, but we're gonna wing it. We're just gonna wing it.
Yeah. And I think what's interesting about that, though, is it creates new skills. It has to create a new skill, not only for you as mentor and onboarder, but for her trying to adjust. So Shane, in terms of the new skills that you're seeing that you've had to develop for your business to support your brands, what are some of the new things that you guys have learned?
Yeah, I think you can go back to what matters. That's evolved. Like we now know what matters or what has changed in terms of asking or answering the question what matters. One, for an employee, for sure, which is work-life balance. And then what we talk about with the new generation that's coming online, gosh, what matters to them? Completely different. Eco-friendly, work-life balance, the Burton story, perfect example, right? those are some things that brands now have to answer. Not one, like we talked about mostly with consumers, but the employee base. Like those are really, really glaring to answer and really, really important. So.
Well, I think then, we're going to wrap it up in a couple of minutes, but I'd like to do some future stuff. Where do you see the biggest frictions happening in the next 3 to 5 years that we haven't yet experienced? And I guess I'll go to the end.
Don't start with me. We're divided.
Okay.
Our country is divided, and you choose A or B. And how do we, as direct-to-consumer marketers, navigate that? How do you walk that narrow? And it's not just with the consumer, it's, as we mentioned, with potential employees as well. So threading that needle is the number one thing I think about.
That's interesting. Shane, what do you think?
I would say being in payments and risk, it's different ways to pay. So buy now, pay later, huge one in our industry right now. Or different currencies, cryptocurrency, like that's going to be acceptable very soon. And all those different things that you could think of that were unknown are now getting exponentially increased because of different ways to pay. And like risk, not just risk, customer acquisition, you could go off in 5 different tangents off of that.
Interesting. Sean, what are you thinking?
I'm going to talk about audience, and really how you define audiences, how you define targets in the broad sense, and getting that to a narrow sense. The average age expectancy is improving greatly, which is a great thing. I'm reading a book now about life expectancy and how that is going to be changing over the next 10 to 15 years. And then we're also, as you said, getting a younger workforce that's very demanding, very engaged, has different expectations. How do you address that 22 to now your employee base is 65, 70, because retirement age is not what we expected, right? That's a huge audience to have to address from a B2C standpoint. And also in a B2B, my customers are my son's age at 22, but they're also my parents' age in their 70s, right? So how do I relate to them? How do I engage? How do I have effective conversation? But also, as a company that produces content, how are we addressing that audience and all that they're looking for authentically?
Right.
That's going to be a challenge. Being all things to all people, is that the solution, or being very narrow focused? And there's not a right or wrong answer depending on what your product is, what your service is, who you're looking to reach, and what the end result, the desired end result looks like.
Great word, authentic. Because people are so savvy as consumers right now and as potential employees. They sniff out an inauthentic approach in a heartbeat.
Well, and I love that conflict between all things to all people or true to my own brand and my own people that follow my brand as a niche brand. I like to say, and I think this is true, you don't have to be a big brand to be a great brand. Right? The great brands connect with their audience in an authentic way. One of my favorite new brands, I'm not a personal shopper, but I admire their brand, is called Kind. Anybody heard of Kind?
Not.
No? Okay. Kind has a loyal and devoted audience. It's skincare, totally authentic, totally natural, really inexpensive, all online. But all their advertising is not made up models, but actually their own customers. So they ask their customers to take selfies. They got blemishes and pockmarks and stuff like that, but they're just people, right? And so they know that they're never going to compete with Clinique, ever. They're never going to compete with them. But what Kind can do is carve out their own world and be connected, so they aren't going to be all things to all people. Meanwhile, Clinique, though, because it's such a multinational brand, has to be all things to all people. Right? They have to be able to broaden their appeal to all ages and all types. And I think that the idea of, the choice for payment, choice for what product that I want to customize, and the either all things or the niche clearly rubs up against how we are as a divided country right now in terms of how a brand speaks. So for me, I think that the future is still always uncertain, but I think it's very hopeful and possible and even more optimistic if a brand can say, okay, I've got all these frictions between myself and my customer, I've got all these frictions within my own organization, how do I map them out and reduce those frictions? And then not only do we work better internally, but we work more directly and authentically with our customers. That's how I think it's going to go.
That's a great summary.
Great, awesome.
You're good at this job.
You're hired.
All right, we have any questions at all?
Oh, hold up. Gotta
we
get
got a
you
man
on
with the mic.
Gotta get you on audio.
I love being on audio. Hey, so it's interesting, I've worked from my home now for 20 plus years, so I get exactly what you're going through. I went to the office all last week, and it's amazing how much you can actually get done. Like you said, on that side, it's different. You're not selling, but you're doing something different. And what you said, Sean, I think what we're missing is the fact that when they're not in the office, we're so collaborative when we're in the office, right? So my question is this, is that, we're running into, people that, don't want to come back in the office. And, you've seen the Zoom calls with the kids screaming in the background and the dogs barking and everything else. And I personally don't believe we weren't as productive outside the office as we in. People say that they are, but we haven't seen it. So we're trying to get people back in the office. And do you guys believe that, and it's my opinion, but do you guys think that a collaborative, not a collaborative, a hybrid model is kind of where everything's going today?
Yeah, I definitely believe that, for sure. Just because, well, as I said, you get the tasks done every day from home. You can do that. But as you mentioned, that collaboration that comes just organically from being in the same space with someone, that can only be done there in the office. So I think office environments are going to change physically and location-wise. Maybe there'll be multiple offices in a given town for a company, and there'll be smaller spaces. They'll be more fluid in the way that you're able to interact with your fellow office mates. So that's going to change significantly, but I do think in a hybrid model is where we'll end up.
But let me give you an example. And I was a super commuter prior to COVID. I lived 2 hours, 15, give or take, from the office each way.
Dang.
And one of the byproducts of having to work from home is I have so much time engaging with my wife and my kids. So my expectation now is, and I was never the guy, 5 o'clock, 5:30, I'm out the door. I am now, knowing that I can go home, have dinner with my family, connect with them. And then if I need to plug back in, I have the means to do that, because what COVID has forced me to do is create a comfortable work environment that replicates the productivity I have in the office. I used to stay at the office because I had 2 giant screens and my laptop, and I'm moving around spreadsheets and Word documents. I have that now at home. So it gives me that balance to be able to go engage with the people who matter, right, most in my life, but then also make sure that I'm handling my responsibilities to my team and to my employer.
Yeah, and the hybrid model that I've found, we've got an office, and we do direct mail, so we actually have a manufacturing plant, right? So we were always open. And some of the knowledge workers, though, had the flexibility. So I've been going back into the office a couple days a week. And what we're doing is we're having a very specific set of only in the office kind of work for those days. So it was so gratifying last week for me to do a whiteboard session. Like, I'm a marketing guy, right? Like, I need to tell everybody what I'm thinking and draw on it. And it was so wonderful, but we planned it. We said we're having a whiteboard session from 1 to 3. This is what we're doing. Everybody's in the office, because you can only do that in the office. Then another day, well, everyone's doing their own private work because we plan all the stuff we're going to do. This day, be home, do your stuff, we'll check in, and then we'll have another day in the office where we're all coming in and collaborating and really moving on a couple of different topics. And I think that that's going to be the future. I think that it's going to be a planned hybrid model where you can get your own private work done at home, because everybody can, but you plan for the collaboration. That way also people are prepared and they're fresher.
Yeah.
Right? And they're ready to go because they're looking forward to doing that kind of work. Other questions?
Anyone else? Sean, I stepped out for a minute. Did you talk about your D2C outfit yet?
I did.
Yeah.
They got the full spread.
Love it. Love it. Love it. Love it. Well, thank you guys. Thank you, Chris,
Absolutely.
Sean, Shane, Doug.
Give it up for
Round of
these
applause
guys,
for these
right?
guys.
They were fantastic. Thank you.
And we will be back at 1:30 for our Government Affairs Council. If you haven't figured out, all of our councils are presenting sessions today. So Government Affairs Council talking about the FTC and the current state of that at 1:30. Thanks.